As we continue on talking about ecology, today's focus is communities. And remember, a community is focusing on all of the biotic factors. And remember, biotic means living. So all of the life, so the different populations of species, whether it's the population amongst themselves or interactions among different species. So a little bit of preview with our vocabulary. If a lion kills an antelope, this is a predator-prey interaction, so we call that predation. A clownfish lives with a sea anemone, they both benefit. When they both benefit, this is what's called a symbiotic relationship when you have two species interacting. And when they both benefit, just kind of a little foreshadow, this is called mutualism. A bird lives in a tree. The tree is its habitat. Habitat answers the where is it living. Anytime you see the word role of the ecosystem, that is the niche. So how does it live? In the food chain, what is it? The changes that occur to a community over time as one species is replaced by another, that is called succession. Stink bugs are not native to PA, no natural predators. That is called a non-native species. We also like to use the word invasive. These are only found in specific regions of the world. Examples are lemurs of Madagascar or giant tortoises of the Galapagos. These are called endemic species. So very specific to certain places. Koalas, duck-billed platypus, are only found in certain areas of the planet. A lion and a hyena are both trying to go after the same prey. And finally, our last word is competition. So a little glimpse of what we're going to focus on today. Now, every organism has a habitat or a niche. Habitat answers the question where it lives. A niche answers how it lives. What is its role? So a habitat has both living and non-living factors. So it's more of a location. A niche includes all the factors that it needs to survive. Does it have specific behaviors it needs to do to survive? Is it a primary consumer? Is it a producer, a tertiary consumer? Adaptations that it has, all that in terms of what is its role in the ecosystem. Resources available give structure to a community. Now there is something called competitive exclusion. No two species can occupy the same niche. Why? Because one species is better suited. Because one species will naturally be a better competitor. And being a better competitor will allow it to get resources better than the weaker competitors. So the weaker competitor either will become extinct or it'll be pushed out of the niche and have to go somewhere else. So we see that with the paramecium right here. In separate cultures, they both thrive, as we see with kind of that exponential looking growth of graph 1. But when they are combined, we see that this paramecium still is doing very, very well. Whereas the weaker competitor population went down pretty dramatically. You cannot occupy the same niche. You cannot have the exact same role as another species. Now, this is not saying among the same species. Within the same species, you will have variations that causes some individuals to be better suited, remember, adaptations than others. Competitive exclusion is talking about two separate species. Now, there are a couple outcomes other than extinction. One thing is we could have the niche completely divided. So in this case, instead of kind of competing for the same things, these birds live on different parts of the tree. So their niches no longer overlap. And the other thing is they will further diverge. Remember adaptive radiation. Where the beaks started to specialize instead of being kind of a one beak fits all. The whole point of these other options, instead of kind of forcing an extinction, is reducing competition. When you reduce competition, there's more resources to be had by all. So we can either separate it out in terms of living in different habitats, which will lead to a different niche, or their food sources become more specialized so they're not fighting over each other. So how do organisms interact with each other in a community? The first is competition. This is when two organisms fight over the same limited resource. This could be between different species, or it could be between the same species. In both cases, we would say that there is an exhaustion of energy from organism 1 and organism 2. So we would say that they both actually are harmed in the transaction, because both have to exhaust energy and resources to be a better competitor over the other. Predation. When it comes to predation, one organism captures and eats the other. So one is killed. So one organism completely benefits, and the other organism is harmed. So it has a negative connotation. In fact, they are killed. So one positive experience, one negative experience. When we see a predator-prey relationship, they go hand in hand. When the predator population is up, the prey population goes down. When the prey population goes down, predator population goes down. So they do have a very connected relationship, and they kind of keep each other in check. So what we see here, the hare population went up to that point, and then what we saw over the next couple years, the predator population went up. Well, what happened then? More predators led to less prey over the next few years. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game, no pun intended, when it comes to predator-prey relationships, because prey are resources for the predators. Eluding predators allows more prey to survive. Symbiosis. This is when we are only focusing on interactions between two different species. A close relationship. We have what's called commensalism, where one receives benefit and the other is basically completely neutral. We have mutualism, where they both benefit, both have positive experiences. And then we have parasitism, where one benefits and one is harmed. Example of mutualism, think Finding Nemo. Clownfish living in an anemone. So we have our two species. They both are going to benefit from this interaction. The clownfish get a home and protection, And then the anemone will get a food source because the clownfish will bring potential predators closer to the anemone. The anemone will sting those predators and then basically consume them. So clownfish get protection, and then the anemone will get a food source when the clownfish kind of bring potential predators close to it. The Egyptian plover bird and the crocodile. The plover bird will eat kind of insects that are in the teeth or of the crocodile, kind of clean the teeth. They're like little dentists, so they get a meal. And the crocodile get all those parasites and other things removed from their teeth. So a win-win situation. So it's not in the crocodile's interest to really eat the birds that are helping them out. So we would say that as a plus-plus. Both species benefit. Commensalism. This is where we see one species benefit and the other species is completely neutral. This could be, sometimes you see birds standing on top of wildebeest, and when the wildebeest kind of are walking around, little mice and rodents and whatnot are moved around, and the birds get a meal. The wildebeest have absolutely zero benefit, nothing to gain, but they're also not harmed in it. The birds get a meal. You may also see this with the remora under the sharks. They look like little eels, kind of suction cup to the sharks. They kind of hitch rides on the sharks, and when the sharks feed, they will eat the scraps from the feeding. Sharks aren't harmed, are benefited. Remora get a ride and a snack. What we see in this case, human or eyelashes are home to tiny mites that feed on oil secretions and dead skin. And these eyelash mites basically get food. They do not harm us at all. So we are completely unaffected. The final one is parasitism. Now this is similar to predation in that one species benefits, one species is harmed. But in this case, the difference is the species is not directly killed like in predation. It is just harmed. If a parasite kills its host, we don't call it prey, we call it a host, then they lose their food source. A predator kills its prey. A parasite harms its host. We have a benefit and a harmed relationship similar to predation. So we have a lot of parasites out there. Think of a tapeworm, a mosquito, a tick. They're all getting a food source off of the host. So how do communities change over time? We call this succession. Now we're primarily going to be talking more about plant life here, your producers. We have two types of things. Whenever you are regenerating from a disturbance, so regeneration, that will lead to what's called secondary succession. And whenever you are starting from scratch, that is called primary succession. So starting from scratch would be like starting from a volcano flow, or if there is a hurricane that kind of wipes out a lot of ecosystems, you still have soil. So that will be secondary. So primary, starting from scratch. What we mean by that, no soil. This takes a long time. Begins on bare rock. You're starting with a pioneer species, typically lichens or mosses, kind of getting everything prepped. And then each stage preps the ground for what's to come. And then the goal is to end up with what's called a climax community, a very established kind of hardwood forest. This takes a long time because you have to create soil, and the species before it will die that inhabited that come before will die and prep the soil for the future species. So your pioneer community, your grasses, your herbs, these will all die and become the soil for the future generations. It takes a long time to do this because we have to make soil. The second one is called secondary succession. This is when soil is already present, so we're simply starting after a disturbance. Forest fire, hurricane, or just developed ground that was left to kind of recover. If you have a developed area around your house, a plot of land that hasn't been built on yet, you'll start to see your grasses and weeds start to take over, and that is secondary succession. So this takes a lot quicker because soil is already present. But regrowth after some type of disaster or some type of disturbance. Okay, that marks the end for communities. If you have any questions, please ask. Thanks for watching.